Hello everyone, it's Dr. Paul Rose here. This video explains which enrichment is best. It's going to give you some examples of why some animals might prefer to interact with some different types of enrichment and how that helps us evaluate the effect of enrichment. I'm going to use my two chickens, Marie and Antoinette, who have appeared in some of my videos beforehand, to explain why environmental enrichment effects are very specific to the individuals within a population. My two chickens have different personalities, and therefore that affects the behaviours that they might perform. You can see these differences in personality clearly in this short video. One bird is more interested than the other. We all know that enrichment is good. It provides an outlet for a range of different behavioural activities. It enables a naturalistic or wild-type time budget to be performed. It alleviates stress, it provides opportunities to be autonomous in the environment, and therefore it enhances animal welfare. But whenever we provide enrichment, we need to measure and consider how long its effect will last for, how much time will be spent using the enrichment. When we use environmental enrichment to improve or enhance animal behaviour, no matter how hard we try to categorize it, we must remember that any categories that we use are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And I'm going to explain what this means by using probably the most famous way of categorizing enrichment that comes from Molly Bloomsmith and colleagues' paper from 1991. Bloomsmith says there are 5 different types of enrichment. Nutritional, which is something that you provide the animal for enhanced foraging activity. Occupational, something that you give to the animal that keeps its time busy for a longer period of time. Physical, something that you give to the animal that it might have to directly interact with. Sensory, something that enhances the abilities of sensory perception in the individual, for example, scent trails for big cats or herb gardens for primates. And social, an element of the social dynamic of the individual's immediate environment that is enhancing to the behaviours that it performs. But I hope what you can see from these 5 categories is no matter how hard you try to say that one particular type of enrichment is nutritional or one particular type of enrichment is sensory, for the most part their effects are continuous. A scatter feed, for example, is nutritional enrichment, but it's physical within the environment, it occupies the animal's time, it enhances sensory perception, and in a socially foraging species, it enhances the social behaviours that can be performed too. Categorization of enrichment allows us to measure and determine any effect, but it's also important to remember, particularly when we evaluate the behaviours that we see, that enrichment is continuous, not mutually exclusive, even though we might try and put it into a category. To evaluate which enrichment is best and to see how long individuals use it for, we should consider 2 basic approaches: the longevity of the enrichment and its latent effect. Longevity refers to how the enrichment keeps the animal interested and promotes behavioural diversity for the maximal amount of time. This enrichment should promote a full behaviour pattern. The longer it lasts for, the more naturalistic behaviours will be displayed. Longevity also relates to the provision of opportunities for positive challenge. How much interaction does the enrichment provide that enables the animal to form a behaviour pattern that allows it more control and choice over its environment? And therefore, if the enrichment has a long-term effect, it's more likely to enhance positive welfare states by allowing the animal more autonomy over the behaviours that it can perform. The latent effect of enrichment relates to the positive effect of the enrichment after the enrichment has been used up or removed. We must measure the latent effect because therefore we avoid animals from becoming bored with enrichment, they no longer interact with it, or becoming habituated to it. The positive behavioural effects of the enrichment are lost the more times the animal experiences that type of enrichment. Measuring the latent effect of enrichment allows us to increase or maintain interest in the enrichment over time. How many times does the animal go back to the enrichment, for example, and how can we tweak or change it to ensure that sustained interest is there? Measuring the latent effect allows us to provide opportunities for diverse time activity budgets. We're able to see exactly what behaviours are performed when that enrichment is used, and therefore that enables us to be more individual and species specific in our routine patterns of enrichment that we give. Remember, enrichment should be a routine part of husbandry, but not routine in itself. If we do all of these things and we measure the latent effect, we maximize the amount of time the animal spends using the enrichment, and therefore the enrichment is beneficial in the long term. So evaluating longevity, i.e., what does the animal get from the enrichment and what behaviors are promoted, and evaluating its latent effect, how long do these positive effects last for, enables us to provide an enrichment program that is best tailored to the species of animal that we are keeping. Let's have a look at how we can evaluate which enrichment is best by using my two chickens. I'm going to provide them with several types of enrichment. First up, they're going to get some salad and some tomatoes. You can see that one bird is much more confident than the other and engages with the enrichment before the other one does. The other chicken has moved away at something new coming into the enclosure. There's obviously a preference within this enrichment for what the birds like to interact with. The tomatoes are much more favoured over the lettuce leaves. We can measure the individual responses to enrichment by doing focal sampling. Each chicken is individually identifiable, they have different comb and wattle structures, and they have different plumage colours. So we can follow the individual's responses to the enrichment. You will see that the chicken that's on the floor, that's Marie, my chickens are Marie and Antoinette, she is hogging, she is using the more valuable enrichment, the tomatoes, more than the leaves. So we've got differences in the social dynamic of the group that's affecting how the enrichment is used. So here's a classic example of how a nutritional enrichment, i.e. a scatter feed with some leaves and fruit, is actually providing a social enrichment as well. And when we look at how the chickens eat the tomatoes, what you might be able to see is that they delicately pick out each of the individual seeds within the tomato fruit. The tomato itself is also an occupational and a physical form of enrichment. Again, a nice example of how the different categories of enrichment are not mutually exclusive, but they are continuous. What I could do if this was an experiment is I could record the time that each individual bird spent engaging with this enrichment, foraging on the leaves and foraging with the tomatoes. I could then compare that to when they are fed normally on their chicken pellet or on their grain to see what types of foraging behaviour are promoted when the birds get this enrichment. It's very important to consider what types of behaviour the enrichment is going to promote. One of the best ways of providing for enhanced psychological and physiological welfare in the domestic hen is to enable an enhanced range of foraging opportunities. Chickens spend a large part of their day scratching around for different food objects. So any form of enrichment that promotes foraging is going to promote physiological and psychological changes linked to this enhanced behavioural repertoire that will be indicative of positive welfare states. Now let's go back a short time later. Remember, it's this evaluation of longevity and of the latent effect of enrichment that is important. Here are my chickens. They've had their salad and tomatoes. What's happening when I return to them 30 minutes after the enrichment was first provided? And here you can see quite clearly individual differences in the use of the enrichment by these two birds. One chicken, Antoinette, is not engaging with the enrichment anymore, but Marie is still pecking around and foraging on the leaves and fruit that were provided. So the longevity of the enrichment would be measured by looking at what the animals are doing with the enrichment that is still there in the enclosure. The latent effect of the enrichment could be measured once all of the leaves and fruit had been eaten. If I saw more foraging activity once all of the enrichment had gone, I would be able to get an idea of how long that promotion of these important behaviour patterns had lasted for. So I would provide the enrichment, I measure the change of the enriched time budget to the normal time budget, and I could then see how the enrichment influences that time budget over the long term. Here is an example of a different form of enrichment. I haven't provided any food into the enclosure here. What I have given the birds is an old stump of a garden plant that died a long time ago. So all that has been provided to the chickens here is a physical form of enrichment which occupies their time and provides them with a foraging opportunity, even though there's no actual food given. The latent effect of this type of enrichment is going to be much longer than if I simply do a scatter feed, because the physical object is going to be around for a much longer period of time and keep more interest. And my last form of enrichment are these tree leaves that I have taken from the branch of a cherry tree that blew down in a recent storm. This is a species of tree that is non-toxic, non-poisonous, so is good to use for your chickens because they do actually like some leaves to peck at and consume. This type of enrichment, which if this was a mammal in a zoo, such as a giraffe, would be called browse, providing tree branches to enhance foraging activity. That's called browse. This is a way of, again, providing a foraging enrichment, but also a physical, occupational, and sensory enrichment too. If the chickens were foraging together, we could see whether or not that's social enrichment. The latent effect of this enrichment is going to be long-lasting because, like the tree stump from earlier, the branches will be around for a longer period of time in the enclosure. So to summarise what we've seen in these videos, always evaluate enrichment usage, both how it is used for the animals, i.e. what do you hope they will do with the enrichment, as well as how they actually use it. How long do they engage with the enrichment? How many diverse behaviours or changes to the time budget does it promote? What happens once the enrichment is used up? How long do these positive behaviours last for? That gives you an idea of the enrichment's latent effect. The longevity and latent effect of the tree stump and the tree branches is going to be much longer than the scatter feed. The scatter feed might be high value, i.e. really keen the chickens are to engage with it, but once it's been used up, there's limited opportunities for further engagement. Whereas the tree stump and the tree branches, their physical presence will remain there for longer, and that will allow the animal to do more with them. So think about, do the animals use the enrichment, and how do they use it? How long are they using that enrichment for? And what types of behaviour are promoted? What key natural behaviours do you want to see? Therefore, we can determine if the enrichment is, in inverted commas, value for money. Is it worthwhile providing that enrichment to allow the animal to express this wide range of behaviours, or should you put your time and energy into something else? Does the enrichment provide control and choice, which are key aspects of good animal welfare states? And does it provide a sense of autonomy and positive challenge, what we call eustress, beneficial stress in the environment? And once we know all of that, we're able to determine the efficacy of the enrichment to the promotion of these key positive welfare states in the individuals that we are looking after. Finally, this evaluation of enrichment will tell us how to best give the individual or the group the most appropriate opportunities for enhancing their behavioural diversity. How are we going to measure the individual's or group's responses? Like my chickens, if the individuals are identifiable, we could do focal follows of their behaviour. If we have a group of animals that we can't individually identify, or there are too many to follow individually, we could do a scan of their activities and record behaviour at specific time points. All of these data will tell us how the enrichment can be best modified, changed or altered, or when should it be given to best promote the goals for that population of animals. The goals might be the promotion of these important psychological or physiological enhancements of animal welfare, which will come from a more complete and more naturalistic time activity budget. I hope this short presentation has explained that enrichment is important, but measuring which enrichment is most important is essential. We must evaluate how animals use the enrichments so that we can get a decent idea of which enrichments work best to promote positive welfare states. And that means looking at the longevity and latent effect of the enrichment so it is most effective at meeting the goals for that species. Thank you very much.